Isaac Holden was born in this valley in around 1805, and today his portrait is on dozens of signposts around the area, marking the 37-mile-long walking route, Isaac's Tea Trail. The route opened in October 2002, and it was created by Roger Morris. He had the idea of using the life of Isaac Holden and the heritage of the North Pennines to link locations around a circuit that takes in Allendale, Nenthead, Alston and Ninebanks. Isaac would have walked these lanes as he sold tea door to door, at the same time raising money for various local community projects. The original idea for the tea trail came from a plan to support local youth hostels, and I'm meeting Roger at Ninebanks Youth Hostel. Not only is this the 21st anniversary of the opening of Isaac's Tea Trail, it's the 75th anniversary of the youth hostel's founding. So, Roger, going right back to the beginning, when did you first meet Isaac? When were you aware of his existence?
It was through his memorial that is in St Cuthbert's churchyard in Allendale. It's the most conspicuous monument in the entire churchyard, and it includes the dedication to this individual, Isaac Holden, reflecting his contribution to local community work and what have you. And it obviously, for me, posed the question of who was this individual, and how come he was regarded so well, and how, quite frankly, it was difficult to find out readily anything about him. So it was all questions without necessarily having the answers available. So it was a plug for the virtues of information contained in churchyards.
But having found out about him, what then gave you the idea to make the life of Isaac Holden and his times a theme for a long-distance walking route?
Well, it's an I've known the area long before coming across Isaac Holden, and it was full of great character and interest. Quite a lot of ruins, even one or two museums, but very little about the actual people and personalities that actually lived at that time. And fascinating though the technology of lead mining and so on, I was interested to know more about the colour and sort of vitality, personality of individuals that lived at that time. And again, a little bit of information might have been known about the more well-to-do, but there was next to nothing about the ordinary lead miners, or that way, to add colour or meat on the bones of their details. And not only that, but Isaac bridged the gap between being a lead miner and having to seek an alternative way of earning a living. And this issue of being an itinerant tea seller, by the nature of the job, meant that he travelled the area, he knew it intimately. Where we're sitting now was where the story began. We can now look out and still see the lead mine where he, in childhood, worked on the washing floors there, and later, along with his brother, father, and if we just look over my shoulder, I could even see where he was born. So really, in the West Allen and the Mohope in particular was the epicentre of Isaac Holden. And then it's really just a question of a sort of jigsaw puzzle of putting the pieces of his life together, based on the nature of the tea selling to the outlying farms and places like that, comparable to what in the north they call the Rington's tea deliveries, and other aspects, slightly broader aspects of the family origins in over Alston Moor, and where he met his wife, Nancy or Anne, near Kirkhoff. So it provides a comprehensive reflection of the history of the area.
So having brought it all together and done your research, how on earth do you then make that a long-distance trail? I mean, you can't just go to a library and find a do-it-yourself book on how to put a big public footpath together like that.
Well, we were talking a little bit earlier about what we do and what our natures are, but I brought up to walk and enjoy walking. It's my hobby or pastime, partly out of, I think, necessity when I was younger, and when I became older it was a mechanism by which you could get about, basically. And so that was, I don't know, my DNA, but where I was coming from. I'd also walked a couple of long distance footpaths, Office Dyke, the coast to coast walk, and so on, and walked in various other places, and it was very apparent, even with that sort of knowledge, that if you glanced at the Ordnance Survey maps at that time, there was no such long distance footpath in this neck of the woods.
But how do you then make it happen? Who did you contact first?
Well, there are public bodies and others in local government and elsewhere that have some sort of interest on that subject, or had responsibilities in that area of work. And I suppose ultimately it's a matter of selling them the prospect of the idea. Also being incredibly lucky with the good fortune of people who I met who either had struck some sort of resonance, or thought they had very little to lose, and perhaps let this weirdo get on with it.
But what kind of problems did you come up against? It can't have all been plain sailing from beginning to end.
I don't think the story has ever significantly changed. It requires a degree of enthusiasm, a degree of passion, a commitment. It's a long game, which I hadn't appreciated at the time. I thought this was comparatively straightforward, just joining the dots on the map, and it'd be self-evident to the wider world what a fantastic trail in a wonderful part of the country which was crying out for visitors. My job had been done.
But
it doesn't quite work. I've been on a steep learning curve
for 21 years.
The story goes on. The plus side of that, though, is it's provided an enormous amount of fun and a great pleasure to meet so many interesting people who are, kindred spirits, or at least sympathetic, and folk of all sorts of people have contributed. And it's really, I might have set the blue touch paper going, but it benefited enormously from the contributions made by individuals and organisations. Now, that's a characteristic of long distance paths, and they either have that good fortune, or if they don't last very, very long. It's taken, I wouldn't know how long, but for Wainwright's Coast to Coast path, it's only this weekend that news of that being given national trail status was given. So I would make the point that it's a great legacy or asset that we have with our footpaths, and it would just, the degree of more support and encouragement to value that, and the much broader agenda that walking actually provides. So,
but having gone through all of that, how did you feel when you saw the first waymarker saying Isaac's Tea Trail with his picture on it, and then when you saw on the Ordnance Survey map the official designation, the green lozenges on the map, the official designation of a long distance footpath, and you made that happen? So when you first saw that, how did you feel?
Well, to be frank, the waymark sign, if I knew now what I would have never been printed red, because apparently red is a bad colour for fading. But I was quite delighted to see that in the first. I thought red was eye-catching, and people need to see that. The downside is it's not a very good colour for. But anyway, that we are where we are.
So the first when you realised it in the ground, there's a post in the ground. It says Isaac's Tea Trail. I made that happen.
I was obviously, absolutely delighted, but the Ordnance Survey business was that early on, I need to explain this, that it was very closely linked to Ninebanks Youth Hostel, where we are now. And there was a small group set up to support youth hosteling, walking, cycling, outdoor activities. And that had 3 planks. It had a website, had a newsletter, and what I brought to the table was the trail. So, it was trying to link those things up. And it also provided the small amount of funding. I worked in the local government background, so I was familiar with something called Leader 1, which was a European Union grant for community groups. So it was there to encourage visitors. So I thought that it met the criteria. I was the secretary also for the Friends group. So that provided the mechanism for a leaflet, booklet, poster, might even play the CD that we had produced as well at that time. So that was like the kit. And it was supported by officials within Northumberland County. Now the downside was that once it was established, that element of support just literally disappeared. It was subject to restructuring, reorganisations, and all the rest of it. So it was the voluntary voluntary element that was carried the can in terms of progressing things. But that was the framework in which was there. And if I'd have known at the time, it already met the criterion for inclusion on the Ordnance Survey map. And it wasn't until a few years later, while this was on my mind, that it would be handy to, and again I thought that would be like another hurdle, getting on the ordnance job done. And I met nearly by chance at some event in the Lake District the Ordnance Survey people and explained the proposition, and they said, it was as if it's almost there, bung it in, and so it was great to get it there, but it might have been there a little bit earlier if the communication side of it was the fragmentation of bodies working in that sector.
Yeah.
But anyway, we got there in the end, and the inclusion on the Ordnance Survey maps is still a major landmark, and really an important aspect of it. But I've got to say that I don't know, it's just the characteristic. Well, I might have enthused about that. I'm not sure that anyway, that might have been just how it goes.
I'm in awe of what you've achieved. Absolutely, I enthuse on your behalf all the time.
All right. Well, you it's very welcome and much appreciated. But
so you mentioned that the waymarkers fade. And they have to be replaced occasionally. How much time do you spend on the tea trail now doing this ongoing maintenance? Because I've seen you with pots of paint, topping up the waymarkers with the yellow tops on them. You're always out there.
Yeah. Well, I've got more scope since I retired, quite frankly. This is the wonderful job for retired people of a certain age.
And how much time does it take to get out there and check on things and then do the remedial work?
It's quite frankly, the better the things are, the easier the job is, and it requires communication, feedback. People like have been on the back and say, this is or that's down. We've had the runners recently. They've topped up and added another pair of eyes to all sorts of things. So it's the networking. To the question, it's quite a simple thing really, is that the National Trails have rangers, whether they're volunteers or full-time, but that highlights the necessity to have volunteers or whoever putting feet on the ground to ensure that it's working. But
you are the primary feet on the ground, and you are out and about. I've been walking on the tea trail with you when you produce a billhook and start chopping back nettles that are coming across the path. So it's ongoing, detailed work.
I pay tribute to those that have gone before, and I think there may be some sort of psychology here of maybe a generation or two that have used to somebody else or other people or the powers that be doing things. Possibly those that are older, and I can actually remember a very active parish councillor who was very helpful, again, with this trail, who always had a pair of secateurs with her and would walk the path. So all I'm emulating what I've seen others do, and I might do it now. It's because I've learned, if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. But there's an onus of having to do that. And I think it's also true of skills or knowledge that farmers probably have, but others are less likely to have that. So it's very similar in many ways to aspects of farming or land management, that fences and all need maintenance, repairing, and all the rest of it. And it's equally the same on a trail. And it's very hugely rewarding, particularly if things work. I think it works on two principles. The big jobs or bigger challenges clearly need to be dealt with by skilled, the costs of that are involved, but there's down to the good old nettle clearance or what have you, that's within every walker's capabilities of doing that. And all I'd say is I'd encourage anybody else to
do their bit.
It's also a very good mechanism of stress relief.
Oh, yes.
There's no you should be prescribed by doctors or what have you.
I will try it.
to get out there more and do a bit of summertime vegetation clearance.
Yeah. So throughout all of this, Isaac Holden walks the land. You must have formed an opinion of him, and there's very few records about him, as you've said. But what kind of a man do you think Isaac Holden was?
Well, I've got mixed, when I think about this issue, sort of slightly different mixed responses. If I was to see him, or he was passing down the road, I think my reaction would be to go the other way, or cross over, because he's sure to want to catch something from me for his latest fundraising thing, and I, best would avoid him. And then at the same time, he's such an interesting character that rubs shoulders with the good and the grand of the day. He was not just in the Allen Valleys and so on. He was over in Newcastle, Carlisle and the like. And it would be very interesting to know the sort of networking and, $64,000 question, the practicalities of tea supplies. I don't know, it might be difficult to ask about the sort of business side of it, but get a feel for the dynamics of that thing.
And he must have been so persuasive, because he would be selling tea at a farm door and he'd come away with a cash donation for one of his projects. Yes. A lot.
Well, I think he built up a track record of that. But what I realised is that rather than giving me the time of day to explain, he'd say, "I'm far too busy to talk to you. I'm on a mission.
Give me some money.
Give me clear on. You say, I haven't got the time to waste my time talking to you to do that. No, I think he was, in truth be known, he was a little bit intense, and but it's people like that get things basically done. They don't fit a particular mould, and the other sort of good fortune I had was several years ago to meet members of the Holden family down in Yorkshire. And I mean, it's one thing we've got this photograph of him, but I met Sir Paul Holden and his daughter. And
they're not direct descendants, are they?
Yeah, they're blood relatives.
Right, but not from Isaac's own children.
No, they're from his brother's brother's side. Yeah, it's going back a long time.
Yeah.
But approximately the same period. But there was undoubtedly a physical resemblance, and the other aspect was that they were both very wiry and really energetic, and really sort of get up and go about them. They were in careers or had lives that were vastly different to anything that was to do with Isaac Holden. But it wasn't to me, a big stretch of the imagination to say that they were small, dapper and lively. And I thought, that I don't know whether that's just a coincidence, but it was a remarkable sort of double ganger type of connection. So I feel it. I mean, as if that was as near as you're likely to get that, because that family likeness is so he wasn't a big burly strapping guy, quite the opposite of that.
So finally, Roger, to someone who has never been to the North Pennines, how would you sell Isaac's Tea Trail to them? What would you say to make them think, yeah, I'm going to book that, I'm going to walk that trail?
It's a place of enormous richness, and it was once described by Peter Sampson at North Pennines AONB, a place where you have to dig a little bit further than the obvious, and if you have the time and energy to do that, you will not be disappointed, because it's a treasure trove of stories, history that are really rewarding, places to discover, but not necessarily widely publicised. So it will keep you engaged and want to come back each time for much longer. And as one who's been coming back here for over 50 years or so, you'll find you won't be disappointed, and there's always something new to learn. And over and beyond that, it's just wonderful countryside, blessed with a huge richness of bird and wildlife, which you will not see in other parts, certainly other parts of England. And you will never be disappointed on a walk. It will reveal something you haven't seen before, or some aspect of it, and you can't want for more in terms of peace and tranquility. It's the place to be.
Well, I would endorse that as someone who has walked on the Tea Trail a lot. I am never ever bored, no matter how many times I do certain sections of it. And I can only say I'm in awe of you for having made the Tea Trail happen, continuing to maintain it and keep it in good heart. So thank you very much, Roger. As a walker, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Anne. That's lovely to hear. That it's positive feedback that energises me to do on not very good days in the winter to do that. So thank you very much. Okay.